Today I'm introducing a unique worksheet designed as a grading system for historical UAP cases. It calculates an overall probability score for potential NHI involvement. I'm also providing printable links to the form on my website, along with an Excel version for saving your work. This worksheet helps determine the likelihood of NHI involvement for any UAP case, highlighting which cases offer stronger or weaker evidence when compared to others. Hello everyone, and welcome to UAP as NHI. I'm your host Bill Seago, and today I'm presenting a worksheet I recently devised that basically grades the likelihood of NHI involvement as it relates to individual UAP cases. I developed this worksheet using Microsoft Excel and have provided printable links on my website, uapasnhi.com. That's uapasnhi.com. For now, you can find links to download, save, and print both pages of the form near the top of the home page. Eventually, I will move them to their own page titled UAP Probability Worksheet, since I plan to add the results of some of the most notorious cases for review. One version is in raw Excel format, allowing you to fill it out digitally, though it may require you to have the program. The other is a PDF, which is limited to printing and manual data entry. At this time, feel free to pause the program and either open or print both blank pages to make it easier to follow along. This is the first draft of the form, and it may evolve over time. I welcome your feedback. If you have suggestions that could improve the worksheet's effectiveness, feel free to reach out. For instance, if you believe any point values seem inconsistent, too high, too low, or need adjustment, I appreciate any constructive criticism. Some cases involve ambiguous evidence or subjective interpretation, meaning certain point values may or may not be factored in. Fortunately, in most instances, these variances do not significantly impact the overall score, as cases tend to remain within the same probability range. That said, I believe the worksheet is well balanced for its intended purpose, providing a comparative framework to evaluate historical UAP cases against one another. It offers a structured, evidence-based approach to assessing which cases contain stronger or weaker support for NHI involvement. At the very least, it helps eliminate arbitrary arguments where one might subjectively claim that a particular UAP case has more or less evidence than another. For example, while someone with a vested interest might insist that Case A appears to have stronger evidence for NHI involvement than Case B, this form eliminates knee-jerk assumptions by putting those claims to the test. You may have a favorite case that you've always believed to be the strongest, yet lacked a structured way to compare its evidentiary points to others. This form removes personal bias and fairly evaluates the significant aspects of each case. It encourages a more objective approach, allowing the cumulative evidence to speak for itself. Ultimately, this worksheet serves as another tool in my ongoing effort to help the UFO community move beyond personal beliefs and reduce the infighting that often arises when old cases are re-examined or new ones emerge. Another way to look at it is this. If we assume, hypothetically, that non-human intelligence is genuinely present in some UAP cases, this form helps identify which ones have the highest probability of supporting that hypothesis. Instead of relying on opinions or the influence of various personalities in the field, this tool systematically compares actual data and available evidence, offering a clearer picture of which cases stand out. The worksheet is designed to focus on the most significant aspects of each case. While there are undoubtedly many additional details or points of evidence, some unique to only a handful of cases, that could have been included in a more comprehensive format, Most of these details are superfluous and wouldn't significantly impact the overall assessment. By simplifying the worksheet and limiting it to just 2 pages, extraneous details and ambiguous points of evidence are removed, making the evaluation process more straightforward and effective. It's important to remember that the primary goal of this form is to assign a probability level for NHI involvement, not to make definitive claims, as many investigators often do before systematically analyzing a case's evidence. This worksheet strictly considers the most relevant and significant factors that apply to a broad range of cases. At its core, there are only 3 main possibilities to explain the UAP phenomenon. Mundane explanations. Every reported UAP case throughout history could be attributed to misidentified natural phenomena, conventional aircraft, mundane objects, or deliberate hoaxes driven by attention-seeking or financial motives. This is the position held by many in the skeptical community, who view the entire phenomenon as a collective nothing burger. Advanced human technology. Any truly anomalous sighting or video of an unknown object must be a highly classified, human-made craft that appears to defy conventional physics. Non-human intelligence. Some of the objects in question are of non-human origin. This last possibility requires only a single genuinely anomalous case to be NHI to overshadow the results of all others. After analyzing multiple cases, the worksheet suggests that some of them cannot be explained by natural or mundane phenomena. Based on the available evidence, credible testimony, and logical deduction from only the strongest cases, we are left with 2 remaining possibilities. Either some of these objects are highly classified, human-engineered craft, or they are of non-human origin. This process of elimination narrows the possibilities until the only remaining options are either a top-secret government project or an object of non-human design. Whether these 2 possibilities overlap is ultimately irrelevant, because if both are true, then so is the NHI hypothesis. In fact, if such advanced technology were being secretly developed by a government agency, a plausible explanation for its origin could be reverse engineering, reinforcing the idea of an NHI source. A high probability score on the worksheet for a particular case strongly suggests that it must be either an advanced human-made craft or a non-human object. There are cases where no other explanation remains, no matter how much a skeptic insists otherwise. When there is no possible element of fraud or misinterpretation, the evidence logically leads to only these 2 conclusions. It is also worth noting that an NHI interpretation does not necessarily mean alien in the traditional sense. It simply means the object originates from an advanced intelligence, whatever that intelligence may be, or wherever it may come from. When fraud and misinterpretation are ruled out based solely on the concrete facts and testimony of a case, only the second or third possibility remains. Most skeptics and scientists, however, reject both of these possibilities outright. They argue that not only is it impossible for us to have developed craft with such extraordinary capabilities, but that even the most advanced civilizations could not either. They remain committed to the first explanation, regardless of whether the evidence aligns with it. At this point, the public is often presented with a different kind of extraordinary claim, a mundane one that couldn't possibly align with the testimony and facts of the case. In other words, a skeptic will force a round object into a square in order to avoid even considering the possibility of it being anomalous or otherworldly in nature, no matter how unlikely that claim may be in relation to what the witness actually experienced. If you're watching the YouTube version of this program and have the ability to follow along, I recommend either printing out both pages of the form or opening them on your device for quick reference. Again, both formats are available near the top of my website's homepage, uapasnhi.com. I also suggest pulling up a version of ChatGPT or other preferred language model, as this will be an essential tool for gathering relevant details on any given case. In my experience, using an LLM is the fastest and most reliable way to find comprehensive information on UAP or UFO incidents. While there are many databases and resources available, an LLM often consolidates information from multiple sources, streamlining the research process. At the top of page 1 of the worksheet, you'll find fields for entering the case name, location, and date. There is also a space in the top right corner to enter today's date. If you don't have Microsoft Excel to fill out the form digitally, you can use the PDF version to print and complete it manually. Most of the fields are self-explanatory, but I will walk you through how to fill them out with Excel using a real case as an example. Before entering any data into the blank Excel document, first click File, Save As, and rename the document using the case name for both pages. This ensures that you retain the original blank forms for future use. For this walkthrough, we'll use the Lieutenant Colonel Lawrence Coyne helicopter encounter, which I covered in episode 4. Now, open ChatGPT and enter the following query. What are the basic details of the Lawrence Coyne UFO case? This will generate a response with the title, location, and date of the incident, which you can then enter into the corresponding fields at the top of the worksheet. This initial response will also provide a brief summary of the case, setting the stage for further research. If you're using ChatGPT, note that it keeps track of all previous questions within the same conversation thread. As long as you don't start a new conversation, you can continue asking follow-up questions without needing to rephrase or reintroduce prior details. This makes it easier to refine your research and obtain additional case-specific information efficiently. The first field on the form is A, Eyewitness Testimony of Anomalous Craft. Choose one. Within section A, you'll find 9 different types of eyewitness accounts, each with a corresponding point value. We are only going to enter one of the 9 values that best describes the number of eyewitnesses in a given case. The first is one eyewitness with a point value of 0. Keep in mind this does not dismiss the account of a lone eyewitness's testimony, but highlights the possibility of anyone conceivably fabricating any account they wish if nobody else was around to corroborate the story. In legal circles, it is often said that one eyewitness is no eyewitness, so that point is conceded here by awarding 0 points. Yet the rest of the form will still consider other aspects of his or her testimony. In addition, potential deductions on page 2 of the worksheet aim to balance out any favorable claims made by any number of eyewitnesses. In order to accurately and comprehensively obtain a list of all eyewitnesses, you'll need to pull up your LLM and ask it something like the following. How many total eyewitnesses were involved, and list them out. The AI model will likely go above and beyond by providing you with a brief account specifically from each of the eyewitnesses' point of view. It will also indicate their job title and credentials, which will be useful for filling out the key eyewitness names section on page 2. The model will also cite multiple specific sources for where it obtained that information and list out all relevant links, which will assist in filling out the data sources portion of page 2. You can specify for it to include the original source as well, and it's amazing just how thorough and accurate ChatGPT is in doing so. Not perfect, mind you, but more than adequate for the purposes of this worksheet. I'll go over all that in more detail later as we get to page 2 of the form. For now, it will help with your basic task of determining how many eyewitnesses and which of them are professional and or a trained observer. Okay, let's get back to the worksheet. The next option is 25 points for first-hand professional, i.e. pilot, police officer, astronomer, or other trained observer. Even though a professional is not above deception or misidentification, on average they will be less prone than the general public, so I felt awarding the lowest number of points was warranted. Not only would a professional eyewitness be much less willing to come forward to the public and fabricate an account that might jeopardize their career or reputation, but they're also going to be more likely to question what they witnessed and critically work through everything that transpired during the sighting. Someone who has more to lose by coming forward, such as an astronomer who might put their career on the line, is going to be a lot more certain of what they witnessed before doing so. If they are still compelled to come forward, then they must be highly confident, at least in their mind, that what they witnessed is an accurate portrayal. However, even a professional eyewitness is prone to fabrication or misidentification, which is the only reason two general eyewitnesses are awarded more points. That brings us to 50 points for two eyewitnesses. While it's still possible for two individuals to fabricate the same story and provide rehearsed testimony, it's a lot easier for one person to do so, even if he or she is a trained observer. For that reason alone, I factored more points for two eyewitnesses over a single professional eyewitness. At this point, you might be noticing a consistent pattern in the point values. For simplicity, all values are multiples of 25. Not only does this make it easier to add them together without a calculator, but it provides a consistent and structured format to help balance out the final results. Next, we have multiple eyewitnesses, 3 or more from the same location, for 75 points. After that is 2 professional eyewitnesses for 100 points. 125 points are awarded for mass local, 20 or more witnesses in the immediate vicinity, and 150 points for multiple professional eyewitnesses, 3 or more. Following that, we should factor 175 points for mass geographic, 50 or more witnesses across the same or multiple locations within its flight path. And finally, flap, 100 or more witnesses across proximal locations over a number of days, for 200 points. The last option is rare and somewhat ambiguous, given the possibility of mistaking any given sighting as being related to the same case. While it's possible for such a coincidence, if the sighting occurred within the same general flight path and over a period of consecutive days, the likelihood of them being unrelated diminishes. Once you're provided with the list of specific eyewitnesses and their professions, pick the value that best meshes with the details of the case. If using Excel, simply click on the empty box beside the 3 arrows and type in the appropriate point value. It's automatically formatted to display the number in the center of the box for clear visibility. Following that, there are related fields that ask the person filling out the form to repeat the same point value if applicable. The first is B, multiple anomalous craft. Add same number of points from A. In other words, if more than one object or craft was sighted simultaneously, simply repeat the same number you entered under A. If you aren't sure, ask the LLM the following: was more than one object sighted by any of the eyewitnesses? And it will provide a detailed answer. The second related field is C, humanoid being also witnessed. Add same number of points from A. If any of the witnesses also testified to seeing a being or entity they insist did not resemble a human being, again add the same point value. If neither of those apply to the case, mark them with an X rather than a 0. In other words, they aren't applicable as opposed to having an intrinsic value of 0. For the Lawrence coin incident, we would enter 150 points under A since there were 4 professional eyewitnesses in the helicopter. While there were other eyewitnesses on the ground, there weren't enough to add any additional points. And since there were no sightings of an additional craft and no reports of NHI, an X would be entered into fields B and C. The next group of point values is D, observables and flight characteristics, which includes 10 different types. Unlike the eyewitness point values under A, where you choose only one specific value that relates to the number of eyewitnesses, this group features more than one option where you pick any and all that relate to the case. You basically consider the eyewitness testimony for object maneuverability and then choose all that apply. You could either ask ChatGPT to explain all aspects of how the object maneuvered according to the eyewitnesses, or ask it each question on that list individually for a more comprehensive answer. Most of them each feature a 25-point value, aside from the first three options, since they feature maneuvers more difficult for something natural or mundane to duplicate. The highest value at 100 points is abrupt flight patterns, i.e. sudden change in direction, looping pattern, erratic behavior. Following that is instantaneous acceleration or deceleration at 75 points, and hypersonic velocities, travels at seemingly impossible speeds, at 50 points respectively. The remaining 7 options are 25 points each and include wobbles or falls like a leaf, hovers in place for extended period with no propeller sound, only applicable if within 500 yards, elusive visibility, i.e. changes shape, no distinct shape, or disappears and reappears, no signs of propulsion or usual flight surfaces, i.e. no engine, exhaust, or wings, no sound or odd sound, i.e. humming, whirring, beeping, buzzing, pulsating, strange odor, i.e. sulfur, ammonia, ozone, and finally unconventional lights or craft color, i.e. silver, pulsating glow, amber, single light. These options include the most common or significant observables that could distinguish a mundane craft from an anomalous one. Based on the flight characteristics as described by all of the pertinent eyewitnesses in this particular case, we should enter point values for all of them except the following 3: wobbles or falls like a leaf, elusive visibility, and strange odor. All other anomalous flight characteristics were reported by the eyewitnesses. Next up is E, proximity to object. Choose one if applicable. If the basic description of the sighting did not include proximity, bring up your LLM and enter the following. How close was the object to each of the eyewitnesses? If it provides the answer in terms of feet or miles, ask it to then convert the distance to yards. No points are awarded if it was beyond 1,000 yards. That isn't to say the sighting wasn't necessarily anomalous, just that the considerable distance leaves open potential errors in observation. If it's within 10 yards or landed, 100 points are awarded. If it's between 11 and 100 yards, then 75 points are given. 101 to 500 yards yields 50 points, and 501 to 1,000 yards grants 25 points. After asking ChatGPT how close was the object to the helicopter, it responded with something like 500 feet at its closest point. Converted to yards, this works out to around 166, which awards 50 points. Next is F, sighting duration. Choose one. Again, ChatGPT will indicate how long each eyewitness stated they observed the object. If less than a minute, insert 25 points. 1 to 5 minutes warrants 50 points, and more than 5 minutes provides 75 points. I suppose I could have added an additional value of 100 points for anything over 10 minutes, but left it off considering anything viewed for more than 5 to 10 minutes isn't going to add any additional significance to the sighting. ChatGPT indicated the coin sighting lasted approximately 5 minutes in total, which grants 75 points for sighting duration. Next we have G, accompanying visual. Choose one. If at least one of the eyewitnesses provided a drawing or rendition of the object, then 25 points are entered into the field. If the witness provides a decent photo of the object, then 50 points are added. That amount should be doubled to 100 if the photo was professionally analyzed and determined to be authentic. By authentic, I mean anomalous or unexplainable by conventional means. If the witness provides an accompanying video, then 100 points are entered, also doubling this amount to 200 if it was professionally analyzed. However, professional video analysis is rare and can be costly, so this high point value will rarely be factored. There are some promising free AI programs out there that will improve over time, so the ability to conduct such an analysis by non-professionals will become increasingly more common. This will also allow others to duplicate or refine those results for an honest and accurate assessment. If no visual is included with the evidence or testimony, then simply enter an X for not applicable. Additionally, 0 points are added rather than 100 if the eyewitness description of the encounter regarding observables and flight characteristics does not align with the video they provided. While it's conceivable that the eyewitness started filming the object after it performed such maneuvers, it's a safeguard against potential exaggeration or deception. A simple question to AI will help determine whether or not anyone included such evidence to the public, and whether or not the image or video was professionally analyzed. For this particular case, multiple drawings were provided by the eyewitnesses, allowing 25 points to be factored. The next field is H, accompanying radar signature. The first option is 25 points for radar technician testimony of anomalous readings, and the other is 75 points for actual radar documentation of anomalous readings. So if there is both written testimony by a technician of an object making erratic maneuvers, combined with physical evidence of the actual radar readings, then both point values should be added. If neither were available, then simply enter an X within both fields. After asking ChatGPT if there were any radar readings of the object reported for the coin case, it basically stated there was nothing official even though the airspace where it was encountered was within radar coverage. Since no actual radar evidence surfaced and nothing was officially reported by a technician, neither point value was awarded. The next group includes 3 main subcategories under I, physical evidence. Remember to ask the LLM if any of them specifically apply to the case. First group for 25 points is ground impression photos or casts, i.e. vegetation disturbance or landing gear marks. Basically, any evidence of an apparent craft landing that leaves odd marks or disturbances to the ground, vegetation, or crops would count. Next is 50 points for irradiated soil sample, burnt area, or dead vegetation, i.e. blown crop circle nodes. This would be a step above a simple disturbance of the area and implies there was some kind of heat source or radiation also at play. Lastly, 75 points awarded for moderate skin burns, welts, or radiation exposure. This type of physical evidence would be more significant than heat or radiation exposure to the surrounding area, as it specifically relates to effects on the body of the eyewitness, something much more difficult to discount. Some cases may feature evidence for all 3, so any that apply should be factored. There were no radiation burns or heat-related exposure reported by any of the eyewitnesses in the helicopter, so I entered an X for all of them. The next line is J, affected electrical or electronic components, i.e. engine, instrumentation, battery, lighting. If the eyewitness reported anything odd occurring with their vehicle, camera, radio, phone, or any other electrical component or electronic device, then 25 points should be added. The helicopter crew did report electromagnetic disturbances, in particular a compass malfunction, so 25 points were added. The final positive point value is section K, unlikely secret human technology, add if date of case is prior to 1960, or if NHI were also observed. Basically, any case dated prior to 1960, or any case at any point in history where the eyewitness also reported seeing an apparent non-human entity, would warrant entering this point set. The reason I kept the value at a conservative 50 points is because of the extraordinary nature of both claims without direct physical evidence of either. Keeping the value low also keeps the possibility of secret human technology open, considering the declaration of NHI adds an additional unknown claim. Most scientists will argue that such technology would be forever impossible for us to develop, but the alternative explanation of NHI is even more extraordinary since it is adding an additional unknown. However, when any possible natural or mundane explanation can be ruled out based on the available evidence, one of these interpretations must be seriously considered following a rigorous process of elimination examination. Also, the reason I chose 1960 specifically is based on a question I posed to ChatGPT. What would hypothetically be the earliest approximate year a secret government project or aerospace contractor could have developed anti-gravity technology when considering the work of T. Townsend Brown and other researchers in similar fields? I also asked it to factor how long it took aerospace contractors to develop now known top secret aircraft from start to finish. The tentative answer it provided was late 1950s to early 1960s as the earliest possible time frame to develop an anti-gravitic craft. Not a perfect method of deduction, but at least something to work with. Since the coin incident did not occur prior to 1960 and no beings were witnessed, we would place an X in that field. The last section on page 1, Notable Craft Behaviors or Sighting Details Not Listed Above, allows the submitter of the form to indicate anything else significant about the case or provide reasons for why any point of evidence might be ambiguous or could go either way. It basically provides you with an area to indicate why something was or wasn't factored if necessary. If using Excel, simply double-click on the first underlined cell to start typing any notes. The sentence will not carry over to the next line, so you will need to repeat this process at the beginning of each line. When there are instances of significant ambiguity, additional forms for the same case could be filled out that either includes or excludes those point values, and then an average score between the two forms could be factored. For example, if one interpretation of the evidence produces a grand total of 350 points, a possible grade, on the first version, and the second interpretation of the evidence produces a 400 points, a probable grade on the low end, an average score of 375 between the two would then settle on an overall possible grade for that case. Sometimes the score will remain within the same probability value parameters, but not always. Once all values have been filled in on page 1, add them together and enter that total into the total additions subtotal at the bottom of the page. Then carry that number over to the bottom of page 2 to be entered under subtotal from page 1. Also be sure to save your progress for page 1 before filling out page 2. After bringing up page 2, if you haven't already done so, click Save As and again enter the title of the case. This will separate it from the original blank form. Total additions, or subtotal, for the coin case came out to 650 points. The top of page 2 is exactly the same as page 1, so just re-enter the same information. Following that, you'll find a list of potential deductions, starting with minus 25 points for L, nighttime sighting. For obvious reasons, a sighting that occurs during the day is going to hold more weight than one at night based on limited visibility, poor spatial recognition, increased potential for misidentification, etc. We may then enter a 25-point deduction for the coin incident since it occurred at night. The next deduction is M, blinking lights, for minus 50 points. While there are many reports of anomalous craft that feature blinking lights, most instances can be attributed to mundane aircraft misinterpreted as UAP. Next is N, red, green, or white lights, but only if a combination of at least two. While there are a large number of reports where an anomalous craft displays one of those particular colors, in most instances, two or all three of those specific colors are usually associated with typical aircraft lights. For that reason, a deduction of 50 points is warranted for potential misidentification. For this particular case, I deducted the 50 points since the object indeed displayed all three of those colors. Even though the strange nature of those lights witnessed at close proximity would suggest something highly anomalous, the points were deducted nonetheless for consistency. The next deduction is 50 points for O, traveled in one direction or a straight line. While UAP are sometimes reported as traveling in a straight line, if the object did not display any unusual maneuvers, it is a fair deduction for potential misidentification. P, traveled at conventional speeds, is another 50-point deduction for similar reasons. Q, greater than 1,000 yards away, warrants a 25-point deduction, again for similar reasons of potential misidentification. R, not officially reported within 72 hours for minus 50 points. While memories of an event can change over time, this deduction is more of a safeguard against someone making any claim they wish weeks removed from an alleged encounter. Someone who reports an anomalous sighting within a couple days of it occurring adds more validity to the account than if they waited weeks, months, or even years. As with all of these deductions, ChatGPT will be able to provide a specific answer. S, exhaust plume or engine-like sound for minus 50 points. While not all UAP are reported as being silent, most are not reported as making a sound that resembles an engine or features an exhaust. Those that do make a sound are usually reported as humming, whirring, or making other strange noises that seem out of place or unfamiliar. T, natural phenomena, possibility of Venus, meteor, or other celestial object for minus 25 points. For this particular case, I asked AI the following. Were there any reports of Venus or other celestial objects that night which could be associated with the sighting? While it provided a more detailed response, to summarize, it basically indicated that is not a viable possibility. U, weather balloon, any reports of launches in the vicinity that day for minus 100 points. That's pretty much exactly how I asked ChatGPT for this case. In short, the answer was no. It even elaborated how it couldn't possibly be any type of balloon based on the description of the craft without being prompted to provide those details. So ChatGPT usually goes above and beyond. V, flares or lanterns, any reports of military exercises or lantern launches in vicinity that day for minus 75 points. Again, I basically asked the question in a similar manner and the answer was no. Finally, we have W, potential hoax or deception, i.e. conflicting evidence, contradictory testimony, suspicious video. For obvious reasons, this features the highest deduction value at minus 250 points. If testimony of a case conflicts with available evidence, then points should be deducted. Same goes for if there are multiple eyewitnesses and the testimonies do not align. A side note on that, however. Slight discrepancies in details are to be expected, especially since testimony that matches precisely might suggest a rehearsed account of events. After all, people often describe the same event somewhat differently and are interpreting what they witnessed from a slightly different position or perspective, so some details should not entirely align. Finally, a video associated with a case that does not match the description of the eyewitness testimony or appears possibly faked, especially if deemed likely after analysis, would also warrant a point deduction for potential hoax. These factors do not necessarily mean there was definitely a hoax associated with the case, but the points must be deducted nonetheless. If the case is strong enough and features enough strands of favorable evidence, deducting 250 points may still produce a possible or probable rating. There is also a why or why not section below the deductions for explaining reasons why point values were or were not subtracted. This section can be used when there is an element of possible ambiguity for any of the deductions. Once all negative point values are entered, add them together and enter them into the total deduction subtotal field just below this area, and again towards the bottom of the page under subtotal page 2. For this particular case, total deductions were 75 points. Once you've done that, you can subtract that from the positive subtotal carried over from page 1 to reveal the grand total. Where that number fits into the probability point range at the very bottom of the page determines how probable the case is determined to be for NHI involvement. Anything up to 199 points grants a 1-star rating of highly improbable. Totals from 200 to 299 are 2 stars and suggest an improbable rating. Anything between 300 and 399 is 3 stars with a possible rating. 400 to 499 points grant 4 stars and a probable rating. Finally, 500 or more points would be 5 stars with a rating of highly probable. If using Excel, click on one of the boxes with the appropriate number of stars and then click on the Copy button toward the top of the page. After that, highlight the appropriate box in the right-hand column and then hit Enter. That basically copies and pastes the group of stars into the appropriate box. Total points for this case after deductions are 575, which suggests it is highly probable for NHI involvement. After totals are finalized, you're free to fill in the data sources and key eyewitness name sections to finish out the form. Again, using an LLM to gather this information is a big time saver and makes the task easy. For eyewitnesses, ask it to provide you with a complete list of names and job titles associated with the case if it did not already specify them following its answer from Section A. If there were more eyewitnesses than the 10 spaces provided on this form, at least include the 10 names most relevant to the case. For data sources, ask the LLM to provide links from where it obtained all the information you asked. I suggest also asking it to cite the most original sources possible, then fill in as many as you wish. While most links are too lengthy to copy and paste within the space provided on the worksheet, a brief title of those links can be copied and pasted, or key search words written by hand for anyone to locate manually. That's pretty much the gist of how to fill out one of these worksheets for any UAP case throughout history. It can also be used as an investigative tool when new cases arise to help determine if there's enough information to warrant further investigation. If any of your friends, family, or members of your community experienced a sighting, interview them for as many details as possible using the worksheet as a guide for what information you need to collect. I'm also working on an additional worksheet that will be featured on an upcoming episode, used specifically for deducing NHI involvement associated with UAP videos. A third that focuses on the testimony of whistleblowers, experiencers, and abductees will eventually follow that one. This final worksheet aims to weigh the evidence surrounding personal experiences and whistleblower testimony, not necessarily associated with a specific craft sighting or video. It must be stressed that this worksheet by no means makes any definitive claims. It's nothing more than a tool that anyone can use to weigh the veracity of UAP cases based on the available evidence for any particular case. While the probability chart might not provide the best or most thorough means of providing an accurate level of probability, at the very least it can be used as a measuring stick or means of ranking the amount of evidence that exists in support of a particular account. In other words, it could help determine which cases are supported by more evidence than others, and in turn rank them objectively. Basically, how does each case stack up against one another, and which ones should be given more attention or due credit compared to others out there? It can provide an honest and systematic look at each case that goes in blind and forces us to leave any personal opinions behind. That brings us to the end of the episode. In a couple weeks, I will utilize the worksheet to review around 20 notorious cases for which most in the UFO community will already have an opinion, and post them on my website. They will be completed forms that you can click on and review in full. The only one I don't plan to cover at this time is the most notorious of them all, Roswell. Since there are so many different interpretations of the evidence surrounding that case, I would like to task you, the audience, with posting your individual results of that case either on my website or in the comments section of this channel. Feel free to specify how you came up with your totals. It must be said that I have yet to advertise or reach out to established members of the community to help drive traffic to my channel, but want to have at least 15 episodes released before doing so. That means it may be some time before enough people are even aware of the worksheet. Be sure to subscribe to the channel or click on the notification bell so that you know when the UAP video probability worksheet episode is released sometime in March. Following that will be 5 core episodes that aim to deduce from where this intelligence most likely originate. Or I may switch those around. I may do the video probability worksheet after these 5 core episodes. The 5th of those will culminate with the NHI origin likelihood chart, which will calculate the most likely point of origin based on the most significant aspects of the phenomenon. It will basically rank each of the predominant hypotheses that suggest from where this non-human intelligence might originate. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you soon.